Swann's Way by Marcel Proust, in the translation by C.K. Scott Moncrief. Read by Simon Callow. For a long time I used to go to bed early. Sometimes, when I'd put out my candle, my eyes would close so quickly that I had not even time to say, "I'm going to sleep." And half an hour later, the thought that it was time to go to sleep would awaken me. I would try to put away the book which I imagined was still in my hands, and to blow out the light. I had been thinking all the time, while I was asleep, of what I had just been reading, but my thoughts had run into a channel of their own, until I myself seemed actually to have become the subject of my book. This impression would persist for some moments after I was awake. It did not disturb my mind, but it lay like scales upon my eyes, and prevented them from registering the fact that the candle was no longer burning. I would ask myself what o'clock it could be. I could hear the whistling of trains, now nearer and now farther off, punctuating the distance like the note of a bird in a forest. I would lay my cheeks gently against the comfortable cheeks of my pillow, as plump and blooming as the cheeks of babyhood, or I would strike a match to look at my watch. Nearly midnight. I would fall asleep, and often I would be awake again for short snatches only. For me it was enough if in my own bed my sleep was so heavy as completely to relax my consciousness. But then I lost all sense of the place in which I had gone to sleep, and when I awoke at midnight, not knowing where I was, I could not be sure at first who I was. I had only the most rudimentary sense of existence. But then the memory, not yet of the place in which I was, but of various other places where I had lived, and might now very possibly be, would come like a rope let down from heaven, to draw me up out of the abyss of not being, from which I could never have escaped by myself. In a flash I would traverse and surmount centuries of civilization, and out of a half-visualized succession of oil lamps, followed by shirts with turned-down collars, would put together by degrees the component parts of my ego. For it always happened that when I awoke like this, and my mind struggled in an unsuccessful attempt to discover where I was, everything would be moving round me through the darkness. Things, places, years. My body, still too heavy with sleep to move, would make an effort to construe the form which its tiredness took as an orientation of its various members, so as to induce from that where the wall lay and the furniture stood, to piece together and to give a name to the house in which it must be living. Its memory, the composite memory of its ribs, knees, and shoulder blades, offered it a whole series of rooms in which it had at one time or another slept. For instance, the stiffened side underneath my body would, in trying to fix its position, imagine itself to be lying face to the wall in a big bed with a canopy, and at once I would say to myself, "Why, I must have gone to sleep after all, and Mamma never came to say good night." For I was in the country with my grandfather, who died years ago, and my body, the side upon which I was lying, loyally preserving from the past an impression which my mind should never have forgotten, brought back before my eyes the glimmering flame of the night-light in its bowl of Bohemian glass, shaped like an urn and hung by chains from the ceiling, and the chimney-piece of Sienna marble in my bedroom at Cambrai, in my great-aunt's house, in those far-distant days which, at the moment of waking, seemed present without being clearly defined, but would become plainer in a little while when I was properly awake. At Cambrai, after dinner, I was soon obliged to leave Mamma, who stayed talking with the others, in the garden if it was fine, or in the little parlour where everyone took shelter when it was wet. Everyone except my grandmother, who held that it is a pity to shut oneself indoors in the country. In all weathers, even when the rain was coming down in torrents, and Françoise had rushed indoors with the precious wicker armchairs so that they should not get soaked, you would see my grandmother pacing the deserted garden, lashed by the storm, pushing back her grey hair in disorder so that her brows might be more free to imbibe the life-giving draughts of wind and rain. She would say, "At last one can breathe," and would run up and down the soaking paths. When these walks of my grandmother's took place after dinner, there was one thing which never failed to bring her back to the house. That was if my great-aunt called out to her, "Mathilde, come in and stop your husband from drinking brandy." Simply to tease her, my great-aunt used to make my grandfather, who was forbidden liqueurs, take just a few drops. My poor grandmother would come in and beg and implore her husband not to taste the brandy. He would become annoyed and swallow his few drops all the same, and she would go out again sad and discouraged.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?